We're down to the last mile here in Camp Nano 2019, and what I'm officially dubbing week 4.5. The final cup is about to be poured. Welcome, fellow scribes. It's July 30th, and Camp NaNoWriMo is rapidly nearing an end. So today, I'm here for the duration, until I either finish my writing or hit a wall, whichever comes first. I have my Camp Nano shirt, so I feel all official today. That arrived after breakfast. I even have a Camp Nano cup. I like this one. It has a little shield on the side and a lightning bolt. And on the flip side, I'll turn it around for you. Superpowered noveling. Seemed kind of fitting. They should put that on a shirt. Whether this is a one-day video or a two-day video, this is where everything's going to wrap up for the month of July, and we're also going to talk about endings in terms of endings of novels. That's what's coming up on today's episode of The Story Detective. Stick around. I have 9 more channels to shout out this week, so help a fellow creator and subscribe. And shout it to the 9s. I want to also take this opportunity to give a final shout to my cabin members. Not all of them have channels, but the ones who do, I will leave the links down below with the rest. And thank you all for participating this month. You've really helped to make it a memorable experience. If you like discussions about writing or tech for writers, target that subscribe button. And at any time during this video, if you find something useful, feel free to hit that like button. It's been a long month. It's been a tiring month, I think, for most of us who participated in Camp Nano. And it's also a little sad because the cabins will be closing up soon, and that space that I spent with my cabin mates when we talked about our triumphs and tragedies, we've all been through a lot of life difficulties this month, which I think probably helped to spur us on because we used some of those things to encourage ourselves and each other. Did I learn something from it this month? Yes. As some of you already know, this was my first time officially participating in any of the Camp Nanos, or Nanos in general. Previously, I did all of my Camp Nano projects as an independent writer. I had a fairly active cabin, but I think being a part of the community and helping one another is important. I think if you're going to sign up for a cabin, it's not just for you, but you're looking out for the other person's needs as well, because during such a time, we could all use a little bit of support. Sometimes just talking problems and writing through have been helpful. Endings are as important as beginnings, in some ways even more so, because how we end our stories ultimately decides whether or not the story lives on in the mind of readers. Endings lead characters to new beginnings, often contrasting how a story begins. Therefore, endings and beginnings are intimately connected. Beginnings often reflect a previous ending in the life of a character. Consider how often a beginning contains residual information from a previous ending. The protagonist begins a new job after getting fired from the previous position under questionable circumstances. Or they're moving to a new town to start over after a divorce or some other tragic life event. A question or desire is posed to readers early on, which directly impacts the ending. But will they get the answer they expect? A perfect resolution, or an epic fail because they brought too much emotional baggage with them? Let's talk about some things which might distinguish whether a story becomes a triumph or a tragedy. The live sprints is something that I've done very little of. Before Camp Nano, I joined one other person's weekly or monthly write-in, and that was fun. But I found that doing the sprints with people actually helped to get more words in. Sometimes when I was facing difficulties doing those sprints and just writing, I wrote my way through whatever the problem was and came out with something that was as good or better than I figured it would be. But I also learned the sprints aren't equally as fun for everyone, because the idea of a sprint, just the word itself, sounds like you're rushing ahead, and that's what most of us did. I like Natalie Goldberg's terminology where she calls it timed writing instead. If you're going for 15 minutes or 20 or 30 minutes, whatever, do you necessarily have to be writing on your manuscript? Can you be figuring things out? There were sprints when I didn't know what a scene was where I got very few words down, but I used the time to try to get ideas. If you were doing minutes, which I'm probably going to do in November since I'll be editing, it would be better in terms of doing those sprints because it can all add up as minutes for your Camp Nano total. and then you can work on whatever you want. If you decide that character A needs a little bit more fleshing out, you could say, all right, I'm going to use this sprint and I'm going to just put a description in of character A and just go for 15 or 20 minutes. Usually if you keep writing, you'll get something useful, or it could be your settings or description of anything in your story that you feel needs more work. I think too, if you have your manuscript or the file that your project is in and you're doing sprints and you're not sure if the sprints are going to be useful or not, because let's face it, sometimes you go into a sprint mindlessly and you write a bunch of blather. Do the sprints in a separate file. That way you can go through them, and even if you only get 1 or 2 good lines, you can pluck out what's useful to you and use it in your manuscript. So I think keeping it all in a separate file and then doing the different sprints for different things, whether it's your actual project, whether it's a character or setting like we talked about, and you're actually adding and compiling to your ideas rather than just lumping it all into the file of your manuscript and having a whole bunch of stuff to go through. In Star Wars: A New Hope, we see right away how unhappy Luke Skywalker is about being trapped on his uncle's farm. He's a classic dreamer who feels he was created for bigger things and wants desperately to shake the dust of Tatooine off his feet and travel towards the stars. In the final scene, when Luke is being decorated as a hero, we see he was right, that the metachlorines in his blood were instinctively guiding him towards his true destiny all along. In Kazu Ishiguro's Remains of the Day, we see the English butler Stevens regretting the opportunity he lost through his inability to express his feelings to Miss Kenton, who was once the housekeeper, now married. Stevens has also been experiencing a number of small mistakes, which he puts down to the household being understaffed. When a letter arrives from Miss Kenton stating she is leaving her husband, Stevens believes his past and present problems might be rectified. By the end, we see his father also became forgetful, losing his mind and then control of his body and dying abruptly. And when Stevens realizes in the end he completely misread Miss Kenton's meaning in her letter, he hits the reset button on his life, a life of service with a new master. His inability to grow and make a change is heartbreaking, knowing the remains of his own days will be spent like a bird in a cage, which he's never been able to escape, and that his life is likely to end as unceremoniously as his father's life before him. What are some other rules of thumb for a successful ending? I once wrote a character that was supposed to impact people's lives. Not only the other characters in the story, but it was set up from the beginning that the events of this character's life, since he lived kind of an extraordinary, eccentric life, was supposed to impact a generation. By the time I got to the ending of that story, and I gave him the happy ending, where he got the girl and lived happily ever after, life just went on. It didn't actually impact the other characters. It certainly didn't impact a generation. There was nothing in that ending by the time I got there that was supposed to have the flavor of the story that it started out as being. And then after I finished it and I read it over, I immediately realized character has to die. It's not always an easy decision to kill your character, especially if it's someone that you're emotionally attached to. Once I thought about killing this character off, suddenly that death impacted everyone around him. And it was something that if the world found out about through the media or whatever, it would impact other people. Whether it's a triumph or a tragedy for your character, sometimes these things can just dictate themselves. You can also see it in your manuscript on the impact that your ending has, and you should always be thinking in terms of how can I improve my ending. You should say, is this the best ending that it could be? Could this ending affect my character in a more personal way that's going to carry on and impact the reader once they think about it and they close the covers of the book? When the hero marches into that final confrontation, they should be willing to risk everything. Maybe they have nothing left to lose, but win, lose, or draw, they are putting everything they have on the final outcome, even their lives in some cases. Consequently, this means the hero has to be the catalyst for bringing the ending about. I once read an intricate plot that culminated in the middle of a jungle. The hero was trapped in an ancient tomb, unarmed, while the villain held the hero at gunpoint. A shot suddenly rings out, and the villain falls to the floor dead. Then we see a soldier enter the tomb and say, "Looks like I got here just in time." The writer in that final scene effectively took the story away from the main character and gave it to the soldier, who is now the hero we know nothing about. Never do this, or your audience will feel cheated. In fact, once you get into that fourth quarter, don't introduce any characters we've never met before, or circumstances you haven't previously planted. Those kind of surprises are like nasty Christmas presents delivered by Krampus. The best endings often have a touch of irony. The hero gets what they want, but not in the way they expect it. In The Magician by Saul Stein, the hero is bullied by a high school gang. He gets the gang leader arrested, but when the gang leader's lawyer gets him off, he goes after the hero for revenge. The ending of that story, not to give anything away in terms of spoilers if you haven't read it, but the editor, when they read the final line, was said to have screamed from his office. That's an impactful ending laced with irony. Endings follow the same rules as any other scene, in that the final scene should be cut at its peak, leaving something left to the reader's imagination. What will happen next? What new beginning might your ending trigger in the life of your hero? Okay, the final count has been tallied and entered. It came out to actually being 52,805 words to finish this draft of my manuscript, so I'm actually a couple of thousand over my goal, which is good. I verified the word count, so everything is entered and set. But when you win, if you haven't participated in any of the NaNoWriMos, this is basically how it works out. When you actually complete your goal, you will get a certificate, and you can fill out that certificate with your book title and show that you won, this particular NaNoWriMo. There's what's called Winner's Flair, which are a little picture for your Twitter header, Facebook cover, and an Instagram pick. There's also 50% off Scrivener, which I already have, and 50% off Dabble, which I don't want. Those offers are good for a month, so in this case they're good up until August 30th if you want to cash in on buying those. So I guess if you had to wait till like the next paycheck or whatever to be able to afford it, they give you a little time. You don't have to get it right away. You have 30 days to get it. So overall, this has been a lot of fun, and that's what this is all about. So you can have a boost in your writing is essentially it. And if you actually complete your goal, then so much better. That part of it and attempting to complete your goal and work on a pseudo deadline like this could essentially help you for if you're looking to get traditionally published. Not that the deadlines are going to be this tight that you're going to have to finish a book within 30 days, but if that should become your career, there will be times when you have to complete things in a hurry. Practicing for this could be good practice for that as well. Of course, the incentive when you're doing it in real life and you're actually going to get paid and get your work published, and that's what you're working towards, can be more motivational than doing it for a certificate or 50% off Scrivener. But this is for you and me to accomplish a goal, and it's also about raising money for charity. So that's a good thing. Either way, it's a win. If you participated, you are a winner. As you digest everything that's happened this month, reflect on the experiences you've had with Camp Nano. I've hoped you've gained something. I hope you've also learned something from my sharing the things that I've experienced. As you take the next step on your own creative journey, know that you are capable of making it whatever you like. Whether it's an outlet from your daily grind, creative fulfillment, or publication, the power is in your mind and persistence. If you can look back over recent months or the past year and see those improvements in your craft, where there's growth, there's hope. And if you have hope in the present, the future is what you create from that hope. So until next time, keep those keyboards clacking.